All right, let's see what we got. I guess we clocked in. Hey, what's going on, party people? Now, if this is your first time here, welcome. It's certainly a great pleasure to have you here. I go by the name of Lespri. I am a spiritual healer. And essentially, what I do as a spiritual healer is that I help you to become Christ like, Buddha like, Krishna like. And what that simply means is that I help you to attain your highest level of consciousness. So, but for you to attain your highest level of consciousness, it is pretty much empirical for you to become mentally and emotionally balanced. Because what that does is it allows you now to have the biggest state of clarity so you can attain your highest level of consciousness. For example, we all say it all the time, right? If you see someone who's being too emotional, in fact, when we say you're being too emotional, we are also acknowledging that there's a certain perspective that is right in front of you at the moment, but due to your emotional blockages or unbalanced, you're able to see the full picture. You are unable, I'm sorry, you are unable to see the full picture because you're not emotionally balanced. And that's what you see sometimes when people are saying people are falling in love. Then when you wake up, you put yourself in a different state. It's totally different. So you have to become emotionally balanced. And the same thing also goes with you being mentally balanced. Because a lot of people do to the fact that they understand that being emotionally unbalanced may lead you to certain undesired direction, right? Or result. But the same thing also goes for you being, let's just say, uh, uh, or you trying to suppress your emotions for you to be mentally balanced, thinking that being, I mean, more logical is the way to go. It is not. Because the minute you become, let's just say, too mental or too intellect, then now you become very rigid. I like to say, like, you become like Judge Dredd like. Now you're missing out on a few things that are around you. You can see, just as being emotionally unbalanced, you were unable to see a few things that were around you. Well, the same thing takes place when you're being, let's just say, mentally unbalanced too. But because you are suppressing your freaking emotions, thinking, just being intellectual or being intellect is the way to go. It's not the case. You become very rigid. You can't see the things that are in front of you because certain things, I mean, requires for you to be emotionally open for you to see them. The one example that I always talk about is when the prostitute, they brought a prostitute to Jesus, asking, what do you think we should do, whatever, whatever, whatever. But ultimately, what Jesus told them, to open up their vision was to make them to get in touch with their own emotions. Meaning, which one of you guys here, I mean, whichever one of you motherfuckers, like, who have not sinned, you throw the first stone. Because what was this was doing here, he used a little bit of emotion to open up their intellect, to give them a greater vision of what the situation is. So for you to attain your highest level of consciousness, you would have to become mentally and emotionally balanced first. Now, when we're talking about you being emotionally balanced, here's what we're talking about here. What we're truly talking about is truly you understanding your emotions, understanding your emotional, let's just say, messages, because ultimately you're dealing with energy. For you to understand, you gotta understand how you feel, man. I mean, it's yourself. You gotta understand your own feelings, and ultimately that requires for you to, to examine, to understand how your emotions work. But most importantly, I mean, for you to understand the emotional messages that is being displayed, for you to understand your emotional patterns. And then at that point, if there's any blockages, then you'll have the ability to remove them. But for you to do so, you would have to become emotionally balanced, meaning you have to be in tune and in touch with your emotions. There's no way out of it. Now, when it comes to be mentally balanced, it's pretty much the same baseline understanding here. Now, when it comes for you to understand your mind, I mean, you have to understand how your minds work. For you to have a better control over how your intellect, you got to understand how it works. You have to understand how your culture is having an impact on you. And by you becoming conscious of these things, then ultimately it's making you more aware, more conscious of your environment. And ultimately, which will lead for you to have better control of you. This is about self mastery. You knowing your true essence. You know, your culture is shaping you to think a certain way. So you have to go beyond that. You have to understand, like, just like I always tell people, you would have to learn how to be an American without being one. That means this is where you were born, but at the same time, you also understand there is more to you, so therefore you're not constrained to just one way of looking at life. So pretty much that's what it comes down to when we're talking about being mentally and emotionally balanced. And as you can tell, it's a lot of work. It requires a lot of psychological understanding. It's just a lot. It requires for you to see your essence. But the good thing is, well, that's what the work is. Because ultimately, what you're truly doing as you're doing, or as you're becoming in alignment with you, you know, as you're as you're becoming mentally and emotionally balanced, what you're truly doing is knowing, it's being in touch with your essence. And this is why that's always going to lead to your ultimate transformation. But anyway, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what I do as a spiritual healer, and that's pretty much the way that I do it. I go about doing it. Now, if you're coming back, you already know this is, come on, man, this is for you, baby. This is for you. Okay? So let's dive in. You already know. You know what I'm saying? Love is love, baby. hmm Now, as part of my routine, being a spiritual healer, spirituality is pretty much my foundation. You know, it's pretty much everything. You know, the way I got to see things, the way, you know, it's pretty much everything. So, as a result, it's only fair for me to share that with you, but also to help you to understand what spirituality is, so that way we could be on the same page, if that makes any sense. So, when we're talking about spirituality here, what are we really talking about? Truly, it comes down to you, your essence, the way you are, your psychological aspect, your physical aspect, life, everything you encountered. Ultimately, it comes down to you, how you operate. And a big part of it, too, entails, you know, a recording of what took place in the past or whatever the fuck. I mean, it's not history, but you know how, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. When we're talking about, okay, so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Let me slow it down, right? So that would be spirituality. Now, on the flip side of that, there's something called the occult, which is also a big part of spirituality. But what I call the occult is the practical is the manual aspect of it. It's also what I call the esoteric knowledge. Obviously, dealing with spirituality, it's helping you to know more about you. It's helping you to know your true essence. Then now, the occult now, it's the type of knowledge that is dealing that's going to help you to identify those hidden side about you. Some of the basic things, let's just say if this is your first time into the occult, some of the basics things that you will probably learn is that you have a conscious mind and you also have a subconscious mind. Now, the part where they telling you about the subconscious mind, what they're really trying to do to you is for you to acknowledge the things that you don't see. As you may know, or maybe if you don't know, the subconscious mind is under the conscious mind. Then the term sub. So this is helping you to acknowledge a deeper aspect of you. And there's so many additional things, just like healing your wounded child, doing your shadow work. All of that entails is letting you know there is a hidden part of you, there's a shadow part of you. That's why when we go see a shrink, there's a psychological aspect of you that you may not be aware of. And until you and your shadow becomes one, or you learn how to live in your shadow, because only through the shadow can you truly bring the light. Either way, it's like this is requiring, like, for you to thrive, you truly have to delve inside of you. You got to go beyond what you look like. Because it's through beyond what you look like that everything is being controlled. And that's the self-realization that the occult or spirituality is trying to bring forth for you to acknowledge. But all of that entails your regular life. It's you scratching your ass, you looking around. Yes, it's you. Now, as you start to acknowledge these things about you, then now you become spiritual. As most people would say, you become you're being born twice. Or the Christian would say you're being born again. Tomatoes, all that is referring to is just you attaining a higher level of consciousness. That's why to be